I'm going to be your facilitator today. My name is Amina Brown, and you either got a chance to hear from Father Gregory Boyle or you got to hear from Terence Lester. But if you missed one of them, you would get a chance to hear some of the amazing work they're doing. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start us off with a couple of questions, and then we're going to take questions from you. So if you have questions you would love to ask them about their work, about the context in which they work, this is a great time to do that. That's one of the cool things about Plywood this year. You don't just get to hear people up on stage, you get to actually ask them your burning questions you have. Sound good? Everybody with me? Great. Awesome. Okay, so this is my turn to be Tyra Winfrey, which is a combination of Tyra Banks and Oprah Winfrey, if you missed that. Okay, so a couple of people, half the room got to hear one of you, and half the room got to hear the other one of you. So before I ask a question, if you can briefly tell us a little bit about the context in which you work, the context in which you serve. I'm going to start with you, Father Boyle.
I am privileged to work with gang members, and I'm the founder of Homeboy Industries in Los Angeles, and it's the largest gang intervention rehab reentry program on the planet. And so we get about 15,000 folks a year walking through our doors. We have all these services, and then about 500 of them work as what we call trainees in our 18-month training program. And so it's a lot of healing, very therapeutic, and tattoo removal, therapy, counseling, case management, and it's kind of a community of tenderness where enemies work side by side with each other.
Terence, can you tell us about your work as well? What's the context in which you work, context in which you serve as well?
Yeah, sure. So I'm actually serving Southwest Atlanta, spanning from West End Mall back towards College Park, Hateville, and East Point area. We work with low-income families and people who are wanting to transition out of homelessness. We do sheltering. We do life skills and life coaching, but I think most importantly, we have created a community where people feel seen, accepted, and loved, which has created a relational base where people get a chance to walk alongside people out of poverty and homelessness.
I want to start out with our opening question. In both of your contexts, you walk alongside people. And I think when we're going to be talking about social good a lot over the next couple of days here at Plywood, but I think there have been a lot of contexts I've been in where there are ways people are trying to help that are not affirming of the dignity of people, that are not thinking in a walk alongside manner. That's the language you use there, Terence. Can you talk about, and I'd love to hear from both of you on this, in both of your contexts, what does it look like to walk alongside people versus entering that space from feeling we are above the people that we should actually be walking alongside? What are your thoughts, Terence?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a great writer that I love to read. His name is Henry Nouwen. He describes compassion as the ability to leave your world, to enter into the world of someone else and suffer with that person. To be voiceless with the voiceless, to feel unloved with the unloved. And basically the context of this quote is to suffer with. I think a large majority of the work that we do is not necessarily trying to figure out how to create solutions for individuals as much as it is sitting with them, learning from them, and listening with them, and getting a chance to know their stories, because proximity changes everything. And so when we enter into this proximate relationship, then because we're in relationship, what burdens you also burdens me. What pains you also pains me. What keeps you up at night will also keep me up at night. And so I'm standing in this fight with you as opposed to I'm trying to see you as a project. Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Father Greg?
I was taught by Henry Nouwen in 1982. Wow. Yeah, and he taught it. he taught. It's interesting. As soon as you said that, he taught. I was in a course called Ministry, and it was in Cambridge, Massachusetts, at Harvard Divinity, and somebody asked him. Somebody asked him, what is ministry anyway? And he was kind of frustrated, and he said, "Can you receive people?" And I thought, that's pretty good, and I've never forgotten it. And once I gave a talk in Houston, and a guy who works with a hardcore gang intervention worker, gang member, tattooed, been to prison, and he kind of pleaded with me at the end of the talk, and he said, "How do you reach them?" Meaning gang members. And I found myself saying to him, for starters, stop trying to reach them.
Right.
Can you be reached by them?
That's
so
right.
people come to Homeboy all the time and they go, well, volunteers, we have 300 volunteers. What am I going to do here? And I always say, no, what's going to happen to you here? Or a woman came once and she said, I have to volunteer at Homeboy Industries. I said, why do you have to volunteer here at Homeboy Industries? She goes, I believe I have a message these gang members need to hear. I went, yikes. I said, do me a favor, come back the minute you've lost that message. And I don't want your damn message. And so the hope is that people will come and receive people.
Right.
People will allow themselves to be reached. And that's how, but it's also, you don't want to disqualify anybody. If you're the proud owner of a pulse, you can accompany, you can walk with people. It's not a specialized, rarefied, step aside, let me handle this. I've been there, done that. No, there's a value to that. But it's a human thing. If we don't want to lose sight of the humanity of this, of the compassion of which you speak. And everybody can do that, I think.
Yeah.
Does anybody out here have any questions for Terence or for Father Greg that you want to ask? Yeah, and as you ask your questions, since we're filming, I'm just going to repeat it over the mic so that we can make sure we hear it. But yes, what's your question?
So both of you I listened to Father Boyle in this speaking, but Terence, you just spoke of being seen.
Yes.
Right? So you see them, they need to be seen. The person that you're interacting with needs to be seen. But both of you just talked about seeing, but kind of interfacing one-on-one and seeing the needs and meeting the needs. But how do you build a system where the individual needs are met, but you still have something that's workable over a large scale? Like y'all have, I think you said 50,000 people walk through the door.
15.
Right? 15. But that's still like a huge amount. Like how do you build a system where you still see people, but reach people on their individual level?
So the question is, how do you build a system where you're still serving meeting the individual needs of people, but where even as it gets larger, those people don't just become numbers, they still become individuals whose needs you see and meet? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so Audre Lorde said, without community, there's no liberation. And so what we really focus on is creating a community where people aren't just, they're received. They're just not like on a conveyor belt, right? Where you put somebody on a conveyor belt, you give them a bunch of services, and then you send them on their way. We're actually focused on creating community so that when you move on, we're still connected. It's like the kinship that he talks about, that there's a kindred spirit that happens where I'm with you for the rest of your days. And so I can tell you stories of guys like Mark, who lives in this community right now, who will come back and volunteer. Like Virgil, who will come back and volunteer, not because they came and received a bunch of services and they're shipped off. It's because they see our place as a place of community and safety. Yeah.
Yeah.
But did you build the system that they can fit into, or did you build?
Well, I think that has to do with culture, right? And so, like, when you walk in certain contexts, you can automatically feel the culture of the place. And so we put a emphasis on love in our culture, and on acceptance, on inclusion, on diversity in our culture. And when you walk through the doors, you feel the culture. You only revisit the places where you are accepted.
I don't know anything about structure, because it's or systems or
Right.
you kind of back your way into things, you evolve, and
Right.
I mean where we are right now, our headquarters and the kind of place, it wasn't a business plan or didn't plot it out. It just we backed our way into it. But culture, community will trump gang. Community will. I think that's the secret sauce. A lot of times people want to cut to the chase and let's just get to the delivery of services.
Right.
But it is the community culture that's the reason why people show up each day. Yeah, the services are good. You want to get to that. It's the difference between content and context. So content is the Department of Motor Vehicles. It's like now serving number 43, anger management, go to window 9. So those are the services. We do that like a lot of programs. But people put content kind of as the primary thing. At Homeboy, and with you as well, it's context, which is community, it's culture, it's tenderness, it's here, rest. With homeless folks and gang members, for example, unless you can relieve their chronic toxic stress that they're carrying, you can't ever get to delivery of services anyway. So unless they can find rest, this is the thing that frustrates, I think, a lot of cities in dealing with complex social dilemma. They don't know that they have to do that piece first. And then you can relax. And then, okay, now let's go to anger management class or whatever the heck,
Right. Yeah.
I think to your question, one of the things I hear in both of these answers is the importance of interrogating what we think we mean by a system or what we think a system is going to fix. And I think sometimes we try to enter into a communal situation with franchise ideas. We're entering into community thinking like, how do we build a Starbucks of helping people do this? And when we're really helping people, like we're there in their lives doing this one-on-one, there isn't going to be that same Frappuccino to have at every location. It's going to be very individualized for people. That's a lot of the sentiment I hear.
Yeah, I mean, because when you think systems, you're also thinking putting people in buckets. And everybody's life is messy, and nobody fits certain descriptions. Well, they may have certain qualities that are the same, but no individual on the face of the planet is the same individual. We interpret stuff different. We have different personalities. We experience trauma differently. I just shared my story in there. I was homeless as a teen, 16 and a half years old, at a gas station begging for change to use the payphone to call my friend's family on a school night because I was going to sleep in the park. Could I come over and have a sandwich? My friend's father allowed me to come over, sit in my car, and sleep in my car in front of his house. In respect for my home life, he came to the car. He didn't have a system. He had words. He had reception. He says, man, like, you're going to be a leader one day. He called out things in me that I had never heard anybody say in my life. He passed away 4.5 years ago. I'm a product of his personal investment in creating community for me, right? That's the same type of investment that we try to create in the context that we serve. Because when you come to me and you're fleeing from domestic violence, you need something totally different from a guy who's been in corporate America, who lost his job, and now he's digging in our dumpster behind our building trying to find a meal. It's two totally different paths, and so we have to meet people where they are.
Other questions? Anybody? If not, I have questions. Yeah. That's some good questions. Okay, let me see if I can say it back. So the first question is, have communities of faith missed their opportunity here or not? Have they messed up in some ways that have made other organizations have to kind of pick up where they should have been doing some work? Question one. Say question two one more time. What have healthy partnerships with faith communities looked like? Let's start on question one. Do you feel that in your context, how would you assess how faith communities are doing? Have faith communities failed in some ways there?
Honestly, when we engage in those types of relationships, I tell communities of faith that I don't want the relationship if you're not going to be long-term. Because you end up actually doing more damage to the community when you parachute in and you disappear with all of your bells and whistles, and you don't become a consistent face in the community. I tell some of our partners who actually come in, like, you got to find a small core group of people who are going to own this in a sense, and not saying that to like say they're going to own the community, but say this is something that they're going to plant themselves in, because once you forge relationships, if you jettison the relationship or you just leave the relationship, that can do a lot of damage. So the healthy relationships that have worked well with us have been the ones who we still have people who have forged relationships. We just saw like Jason Marcus, he's outside right now. He forged a relationship with an individual, this guy named Johnny. Johnny is actually in an apartment in Tennessee. That wouldn't have happened had that relationship not forged, and he stuck with it. So we try to focus on people who are going to be committed to the relationships they form in our community for us.
I guess I don't really believe in waiting for anybody, you know, like if you have, like for organized religion or something, I mean, it doesn't make, or churches, I presume is what you're trying to say when you say faith communities, maybe. Yeah. I think this is a faith community. These are people who are committed to something, I think from a Christian perspective, I think it's about taking seriously what Jesus took seriously. And he took 4 things seriously: inclusion, nonviolence, unconditional loving kindness, and compassionate acceptance. That's it,
Yeah.
So, who's the faith community? Who, even if Jesus isn't even part of that for you, if that's so, those are the things that you take seriously. Come on in, and then it's not about convincing anybody or winning the argument, or it's about something else. It's about accompaniment, as has been mentioned. And so, but if you wait for, I'd much rather have us lead, and then faith communities will follow. But if you're waiting for faith communities to step up and do something, I think it's a kind of a futile thing. But I fear that, probably, but you always want to be connected to a community. I mean, at Dolores Mission Church, it's very poor, monolingual, kind of uneducated, and these people know what time of day it is. The church is open for the last 30 years. The church is open every night. Homeless people sleep there every night. They just do things. I can remember Whoopi Goldberg was interviewed in the back of Vanity Fair. It was one of those Q&A, and she was asked, what living person do you most admire? And oddly, she said, Pope Francis. And then she adds this, yeah, he's going with the original program. And I remember reading that, and I said, yeah, that's what it is. It's the original program. Everybody can connect to the original program, which is inclusive and spacious and expansive and nonviolent and loving without measure and without regret. It's all those things that we connect to. Now, whether churches do it or not, oh well, I'm not going to let it hold me back. But there's kind of a church of Homeboy Industries, which is okay, where we gather. It's very loving. Jean Vanier, who just died, who started the L'Arche community movement, used to say that the highest form of spiritual maturity is tenderness. And I think he's right. And so once you have communities of tenderness, that's compelling. People look at that and, wow, that's the original program. I want to be a part of that. I want to ventilate the world with tenderness, and the world changes because of that, I think.
Yeah.
Other questions? Yeah.
So, from my understanding of your books, and I'm not super familiar with book, but hearing you guys talk, your human-based approach to caring for marginalized folks sometimes sits in the middle of issues, whether it's one side or the other, political, liberal, Republican, two extremes, basically. And that is can be really hard. So how do you create the nuanced approach that you have to the work that you're doing without getting bogged down by either side wanting you to do it in a certain way?
Okay, let me see. I'm good. Okay. So you said, how can you continue to serve in your context with a nuanced approach without getting bogged down in what can be the bureaucracy on either side, politically, in government work, religiously, in those different areas? Yes? I'm becoming a translator. Either of you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I guess my center is just twofold. It's love God, love people. Love is the absence of judgment, right? And so when people come into our context or our culture, I try to strip away all these ideologies. I'm asking people to come and leave their the lenses in which they view the world at the door, because you can't serve someone or you can't be or receive someone when you, in the back of your mind, have a false narrative playing in the back of your mind about them. Love is the absence of judgment. And so when you really are called to love, that means you have to sacrifice and lay some things down. I work with all types of people. Majority of the people that come to us aren't in church, and they will probably never darken the doors of a community of faith. But does that mean that they are not deserving of love and compassion and support? I follow Christ in a way that trumps ideology, right? And so if I'm really there and I'm there to be inclusive and create a safe space that has tenderness, then I have to let some things go for me.
Yeah, Mother Teresa said that the problem in the world is, of course, that we've just forgotten that we belong to each other. So,
Right.
so part of what people yearn for is you stand against forgetting that. And so I think people are surprised when we connect at the level of yearning.
Right.
Like, we all want this, and people could connect to it. And but it's also about health. There's a kind of a movement towards health and wholeness, which is holiness as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And so then you stop hating, then you kind of, are more sophisticated about, like in California, we just had, at that Gilroy Garlic Festival, all the people killed there. On the front page of the LA Times today online, I was looking at, it's like, what was his motive? And I go, wow, really? What was his motive? So they're trying to get at this rational thing, because then we can hate him. Because you go to his footprint, I don't know what it is, and he went to white supremacists. I go, seriously? Just talk about health. Does a healthy person ever do that? No. Is a healthy person ever tempted to do that? No. Then suddenly, if you're talking about health, it's a completely different thing. I had two nephews, one recently who hung himself. And his younger brother had done the same thing 5 years before. They didn't choose mental illness. It chose them. And surrounded by love, and we got you, but the voices and the refusal to take meds, and this is not to stigmatize mentally ill people, but it's a way of going, just again, I don't want to belabor this, but a guy 2 days out of prison, a white guy at a Circle K convenience store in Phoenix, and there's a young man listening to rap music, African American, overly loud. He goes up and he slits his throat and kills him. And the police at the scene talk about this white guy who did this. He didn't seem mentally disturbed. And I go, Exhibit A, he slit the throat of a perfect stranger. But you see what we do? We're not going to be able to hate him if he's mentally ill. So we're going to cancel that possibility out. So I'm 65 years old. I've been a Jesuit for 47 years, a priest for 35 years. Sin doesn't make that much sense to me, because I work with gang members who've done horrific things. But they're all like a 10 on the ACE scale, the adverse childhood experience. I'm a 0 on the ACE scale. I haven't been exposed to any horrible thing growing up. But everyone who walks through our door is on a 9 or a 10. Talk to me about sin. Well, they have a choice. Yeah, not all choices are created equal.
Right.
And so once we get to this other place where it's not about good and bad, there are no bad guys anywhere, ever. There are people who are in pain, and there are people who are suffering, and people are carrying more than I've ever had to carry. And that's how God sees it. God doesn't know what we're talking about when we're kind of reducing everything to whatever, hate crime. Nobody in this room has ever met a mentally healthy racist, ever. You've never met a mentally healthy anti-Semite, ever. And once you know that, then all of a sudden, we're not talking about bad or sin. We're talking about sanity and health, and how can we help each other, because we belong to each other. And I think we're not there yet by a long shot. But I think that's how God sees, if you'll permit me.
So can I have a follow-up to that?
Okay.
Sorry. But both of you answered it in a very similar way. So when you have people that come against you with that perspective, is it just easy for you to walk away then? Because
Do people oppose you?
people oppose what you're doing or approaching that.
Yeah, people always oppose me. I remember just last year I was doing this campaign where I was bringing attention to poverty in our country. I was walking from Atlanta, Georgia to the Lorraine Motel to speak at ML King 50. I walked through Tennessee, Alabama, and Mississippi. The police was called on me 10 times. And when I was in Mississippi, I'm talking about like tons of cars would show up, hands on guns, everything. I had trucks to try to come off the road to literally hit me while I was walking in Alabama. I had people call me boy and out of my name, some of which I won't say here. And it was very difficult. It took me 33 days to walk from here to the Lorraine Motel to talk about poverty in our country. This kid who's walking with me one day with the parent asked me, says, "You're experiencing all of this hate. What keeps you going?" I said, "Because the people who hate me are also poor. Love keeps me going. Because when you truly love, it doesn't really draw any boundaries," as Father Gregory was saying. Yeah.
Great. Let me take one more question before we have to close out. Final question. Yeah, right here.
Oh, well, it's a twofer.
What makes you want to quit? And then what do you say to yourself to help you get up the next day?
I gave up a long time ago wanting to quit, you know. Yeah, so I just don't believe in it. I don't believe in disappointment. I also don't believe in success. We're not called to be successful. We're called to be faithful. I don't want to fix, change anybody. I don't want to rescue anybody. I think saving lives is for the Coast Guard. And I think, you know, if you're going to the margins to make a difference, it's about you. And I don't believe in it. And my staff will go, oh my God, I'm so burned out. I just think I'm so compassionate. I go, no, it's about you. That's your problem. The minute it's about somebody else, then you're receiving people. You're being delighting. You can't wait to get in there because your heart is going to be altered. And then that's different. But people burn out because it has to be about them. And the minute it stops being about you, oh my God, it's eternally replenishing. And so you never want to quit. You want to go, this is where joy is. Yeah. My joy, yours, your joy complete. And it happens at the margins, in the proximity. Once you put yourself in the proximity and you want it to be about somebody else, watch what happens.
I would say for me, like he explained earlier, it wasn't something that I was choosing just to do. This work kind of found me, and I think the thing that drives me the most is getting to sit and listen and be with people who have stories that could they'll wreck you. Even with all that I've gone through, sometimes I sit and I say, you mean to tell me you walked 5 miles for diapers? You mean to tell me that you walked all night because you were scared to fall asleep under a bridge for fear that you'll be raped? You mean to tell me that you don't know where your next meal is coming from? I get to be with some of the most important people in the world. People have a high value priority in my heart, and this is what I'm on earth to do. When I go to my grave, I want to go empty, giving all that I can to be with people and to make it about people, as Father Greg has said.
I think that's a great closing point. Wait, go ahead. Or this one.
So you can quit what you do. You can't quit who you are. Like, I'm not called to quit what I'm doing. I'm never going to give up being who I am, though. Yeah.
That's also a great closing point. That one, too. Just a lot of great closers right here. Can we thank Father Boyle and Terence Lester for joining us?